mean, just quickly. I mean, when we design the actions in the missions, we were thinking, what are these things that one can do to various levels of gaminess that one can do over the course of the week, and what are the immediate rewards? So in Think Fast, for instance, it's just basically it's just a survey. But what's interesting about that is people will answer questions on their mobile phones, but then as an incentive for answering those questions, they get points, but they also get to see their answers mapped onto the community answers as well. So they get all that, and they also get to see people who have answered similarly, essentially, so they can form alliances throughout the gameplay. Mapit is an interface that we're designing that's basically also going to be prompts, but we're going to get people to draw maps or to plot points within around specific issues. So what's the most dangerous place in your neighborhood, for instance. So we'll draw a map around that on your little mobile map, and then you'll be able to sort of visualize other people's maps around that area as well. And so again, that's the incentive for each of these actions is going to be sort of plotting oneself within a larger community framework. Let's talk a little bit about someone else's shoes. I mean, one of the things that was really successful in the Chinatown game was this aspect of empathy that I mentioned. In this case, what we're doing is we're going to build virtual characters that live in the neighborhood essentially. And one of the things that's going to happen is that throughout the gameplay, as you're asked these questions, as you're asked to map things, you're also asked to do things for these characters that exist in the neighborhood. And so this is something that will sort of continually chime in, these people, and we're going to develop 5 of them, we think, 5 sort of prototype characters that any neighborhood can employ. And people would write their own biographies, essentially, of these characters. The curators, I'm sorry. The curators will write their own biographies of the characters, and those characters will be specific to that neighborhood and will interact with people in a very specific context. I should say in Chinatown, the way that we had 15 characters, the way that we built the characters in Chinatown is we actually had local youth go out and interview people in the neighborhood, and we used those interviews to get to build biographies of the characters that became the core of the Chinatown game. So we're actually going to suggest that people do something very similar, is engage youth early on, get them actually interviewing people, and then build those biographies based on people who actually live in the neighborhood. And then do it, I should say something about do it. This is, if all of the other actions in a mission are going to be kind of curated and top down, we're going to ask people to do particular things. Do it is sort of a challenge-based system where people can challenge other people in their neighborhood to do things, and there'll be an evidence system that, go out and collect trash on your street as an example. Someone accepts that challenge or accepts that mission. And then they photograph that. They photograph that and submit it to the game, and there'll be a verification process as well to make sure that they actually did it. So so if you imagine then that the course of the gameplay, and this is really what we want to talk to you guys about, that the experience of this game over the course of a week is basically going back and forth between these various actions in each of the themed missions, following, I mean, I think part of the fun of this game is simply going to be following other people's actions, and then challenging other people to do things. So we're really hoping that there's a physical presence to this game in every neighborhood that it's played in. And then all of that, then, here's the concept, is that this is about capacity building. This is about getting people to think about the central planning issues that are going to be relevant to any neighborhood, and then bringing them to bear on a very local context, and then bringing people together ultimately around that meetup that's going to happen at the end of the 6th week, and then giving people access to essentially everything that happened during the game. It's that sort of debriefing, but then also that manipulation that can happen. So there's going to be a lot of data visualizations essentially of what happens during the game, and we're going to invite people to further manipulate that data as a mechanism of essentially contributing. After that meetup, all the social networks that are developed in the game are going to persist. So the idea is that the platform remains relevant as a space for ongoing conversation after the instance of a game. And then again, the ideal is that if in a year there's another piece of the planning process that goes on, another instance of the game can just build right on top of it. So that's the goal, is that there can be multiple iterations of a game in one particular neighborhood. And then also you can have games being played in various neighborhoods throughout the country or throughout the world, where players can go and look at what's happening in Denver, or look what's happening in Bangkok, or wherever there's a game being played, without being able to contribute. So there's also this sense of kind of looking into other local processes as a mechanism of informing what happens in a very specific local context. So maybe we should just, give you guys an opportunity to respond if you have anything to say about this. Yeah.
I mean, just a couple of questions for clarification, I guess.
Sure.
So, first of all, what's to prevent somebody from coming into a process like this and just bribing everybody who's playing to put their coins in the things that they care about?
Bribing everybody?
Yeah, like literally. I mean, it could be literal.
Playing
it could
the
be,
system.
Yeah, playing the system.
Yeah.
So some say the developer who has a plan. They know what's going to maximize their profit margin, and they implement this because they're federally required to engage in the community, and of course they don't want community backlash. But what's to prevent them from doing stuff that's not being tracked, to encourage people to put all the coins that are earned in the areas that back the developer's plan? Just an example.
Well, I suppose nothing is preventing them from doing that. There's like with any process, there's a certain amount of trust that has to go into the running of a process. I mean, what this there is transparency to the system that is unprecedented in an urban planning context, right? Yeah. So what you're going to have here is if a developer or a planner agrees to use this, they're agreeing to a certain amount of transparency. I doubt, and maybe I'm just too trusting, I doubt that a planner who agrees to do this is going to game the system, especially knowing the amount of transparency that exists, knowing that what takes place in this game is going to exist online, and it's going to be very difficult to get rid of. Now that said, we certainly should think of safeguards to avoid some of that. I don't think we can ever avoid all of it. I mean, I think that there is going to be some manipulation of the system. There's also going to be administration. So every game that takes place, there's going to be people in that locality that are administering.
Right.
And the hope is that you have somebody spending 10 hours a week, just someone trustworthy. Yeah, exactly. Just kind of sifting through the comments and the kind of the way in which coins are being spent. I mean, I think it's important to have that person in every locality. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that if from your cynical perspective, is that
possible? I'm entirely too cynical about this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have to admit, just from an efficiency standpoint, I mean, why would you bother with the video game if it would be more efficient just to bribe the community directly?
Exactly.
The software.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, you really need. The majority of the planning community will not do this. And so the people who are going to take a chance on this at the beginning are going to be forward-thinking planners anyway. And so that's why I'm saying, like, I'm trusting that there's some sort of good faith involved in just their willingness to do this. It could all be a ruse. It could all just be a way of sort of placating the community. That's possible. But
the question,
yeah.
Go ahead.
the quick question I had is, as a way to set the ground, how do you access this game? Like, is there a gateway, or anybody can log in? Because I think that
Are
might
you handing out touchscreen phones to people?
No, we're not. So the way that
how are you identifying people?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing. I don't know if it's
right. So it's a big thing, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about it because designing for touchscreens is, of course, excluding a lot of people. The game is fully playable on the web. Like, there's very few things that aren't full service by playing it on the web. There's a couple sort of location-aware pieces, but mostly it's okay to play without it. Now, not everybody has web access either, but what we're doing is we're in every implementation, again, these are all recommendations for the implementation, but we're recommending that community centers, libraries have designated stations, So people, schools, even if we can work with schools, have designated stations where people can access a sort of community planet station. So you know you can go into the library and access the game, and log on and play the game. There's some of the game, now that's for people who don't have the internet at home at all. There's some of the game where there'll be some functionality with SMS where there'll just be push notifications to people that sort of prompt them to go to the web. So we're building that into the system as much as we can. We had to make that decision ultimately where in the Chinatown game, for instance, we went so far the other way, saying that we're only playing this game in a physical space, we're providing computers, we're providing teenagers to help people who aren't comfortable with computers, we're doing everything. And we went through such extremes, and it worked. And we're going to do that with the meetup as well. We're going to bring people together. We're going to have youth there. We're going to have, we're going to make people as comfortable as possible with the computer. We're actually going to be using tablets for the meetup that we have. We're going to get people as comfortable as possible in that space. But to expand to this other space, we had to make the decision: do we build a game that's entirely functional via SMS, and that would be a very boring game. Or do we say we can build in this sort of multi-platform way and have an enriched, ideal experience, but have these other experiences that are pretty good also, that we can imagine not, trying as hard as we can to not exclude people. What's interesting about planning, though, is that with so many of these, sort of smartphone applications, the criticism is that it excludes a lot of people. But with planning, what's interesting is that the typical people who are engaged in planning are the elderly, are the people who probably don't have smartphones already. So actually, by getting the smartphone crowd in, we're actually increasing the diversity of the people who are participating in planning. So there's something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, unless this is the only way they can contribute.
Exactly.
In which case, you're switching who's
right, and that's not good either. But I mean, we're trying our hardest to balance
but
that.
actually, my question is like, how do you get into this game? So how do you select the people? Is it anybody can log in from anywhere, or?
Well, so we're going to do a couple. There are going to be a couple safeguards in place. We're when you log into the game, you have to designate what community you're playing in. So maybe there's 5 games going on at once: one in Akron, one in Philadelphia, one in Denver, and you would say I'm playing in Denver. We'll have some. We'll record IP addresses. We'll record location data if we have it. If they're logging on with their mobile phone. We'll get all that. We're not going to exclude people, I don't think, if they're logging in from a different IP address or from an IP address that's not local. But we will keep track of that, and we might even, as we begin to sort of aggregate the data, we might even parse out the people who are playing non-locally versus the people that we can at least tell are playing locally.
I mean, there could be someone who's playing remotely but has lived in the neighborhood.
Exactly, that's right. And one of the first things you do in the game is you have to designate whether you work, live, or play in the neighborhood. So there are stakeholders. You might not live in a neighborhood, but you work there, and you might live 50 miles away, but you're still invested in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and like in the Chinatown game, we had people that came from North Quincy because they spent a lot of the time in Chinatown and they felt like they really had a stake. So. And they would probably still come to community meetings anyway, even though they don't live in the community. So we can't necessarily exclude everyone who's not physically there, but I mean, again, you could have people 4chan that could get on.
Yes.
Right. Well, when we did the first project, and this was back in 2008, in Alston. That was the first project, the Second Life project. And I remember distinctly this woman at this meeting was very upset that we were using Second Life as a way of getting people involved in planning. And she says, she's like, what's to stop people from New Hampshire coming on and chiming in about Alston? And I thought, like, wow, what is to stop that person from New Hampshire? I mean, we should have all sorts of safeguards against people from New Hampshire participating, but but her sentiment was really clear. It's like, this is a local process. And when you make this accessible on a global web, you're challenging the locality and the specificness of a process. So we have to be very mindful of that and make it clear to the players that, and we will visualize that for players. We will tell people where people are logging in from, so they'll get a sense that most people are contributing from a local space.
So it kind of seems like you have 2 problems that you're.
Only 2.
Only the 2, and
right.
I'm the authority, damn it. So you're kind of managing to, all right, the people doing the development need a better tool for doing their community engagement. But then it seems like you also have, you had said the people who are already predisposed to do this would be people like the elderly. So I'm guessing there's this untapped community voice that presumably the better tool would also bring in people who would not normally take part in the engagement process. Yes?
Yes.
No? Okay.
That's right.
So my question on that one is, what's the carrot for them? I mean, what does the game offer them other than, hey, it's a game? Sorry.
Well, I can respond to that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what does it offer them other than it's a, because I'm thinking, I'm not sure that just it being a game is going to get like the homeowner who has never nor will ever care about what goes up in the lot across town. You know what I mean? Like, how are you attempting to bring those people in? And if you are, what are you offering that?
Is the question like, what is the target audience that you guys are trying to get to, and then what is the specific thing that this game does which targets their demographics?
Well, no, I think I know what the target audience is.
Well, let me try to respond to the question. First of all, it's the threshold is so low at this point for participation, right? In these meetings. I mean, you can have a community of 50,000 people, and you feel really good about yourself, and you get 100 people to a meeting. Right, so it's not like we have a lot of civic participation in this process. So that's not to excuse away what you're saying, but if we could get 1,000 people, then that would be fantastic, as an example. To get that homeowner that doesn't care and will never care, well, we'll probably never get that person. But we might be able to get that person who doesn't have time to go to a meeting, is intimidated by local politics because it's really intimidating. Is bored by local politics because it's really boring, and instead will say, oh, I'll play this game that I can play for 2 minutes a day, or that I could sort of browse when I'm not doing anything else. I can sort of very casually play this game that's about my neighborhood. Now, I mean, I could throw this question back at you guys, and where you live. If a game like this was going on about your neighborhood, where people are talking about and competing over things that are going to take place in your neighborhood, you'd probably at least be curious. And if the game was somewhat good, you might even play it. And so the idea is to make that barrier to of engagement so low, where I hear about this and I'll turn it on and I'll find out a little bit about what's going on in my neighborhood, and you have this. Then you have this kind of multiplicity of engagement. So in the traditional sort of town hall democratic process, it's like all your chips in or not. Like you got to go to that meeting or not. Here you get to sort of get your feet a little wet, get a little comfortable with it, and maybe even get engaged in what's going on, so that you're motivated then and feel more comfortable to go to that live meeting that's going to happen in your neighborhood. So there are two pieces to what we see as the goal of this game. One of them is providing good feedback for planners, because that's important. And the other piece is engagement. It's just giving people a reason to care about their locality. And both of those things are important, and you can actually you can use an existing planning process to engage people. Typically, an existing planning process is put into place actually to tear people apart. And they're really they can be really contentious, and one of the things that we can do here is we can take that planning process, and where there still may be and hopefully will be argument, what you get though is a hopefully a platform where that argument can build into something that's more pro-social, that's better for community building, and that can engage people beyond an existing like a one-off process. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your questions. Part of my answer to your question is if we can increase the amount and diversity of people just a little bit, then we win. If we can increase the amount and diversity greatly, then we really win. So, I mean, that's how we're approaching the game at this point. Yeah.
So, you get these coins from undertaking mission actions and what have you, and then in the end, what comes out of this is how everybody spent their coins, and like the kind of aggregate allocation of people's coins across all of these different values that they have in the community. So I guess somebody you might have more coins, you might have lots of coins for like 2 reasons. One might be really passionate about your issue and you play dedicatedly to try and get many, many coins so that you can spend it all on the thing that you really care about. Or you might just think the game is fun and play a ton and you don't really care about the community issue, but you just kind of spend it however you like. In either case, the person who spends a lot of coins like that, I don't know if they necessarily should have like a bigger say whether they should be disproportionately represented in the community's views for the planners, which is what you get out of this kind of aggregated data at the end. So I mean, were you thinking of having this as kind of the coin allocations at the end as being like just raw values, so you're kind of pulling all these coins together, or are you looking at like the average proportion of coins that people spent on different values or this kind of thing? Like, how does the data look at the end when the planning goes through and checks things out?
No, it's a good question. It's going to be proportional. That what we really want to look at is the percentage of coins that are spent on a particular thing. So and that's the way of combating just what you're saying. If someone earns 100 coins and they spend those 100 coins, and we want to at least put that in check. That it's still going to affect the proportions, but not as great as if we just looked at the raw data on coins. But you do have a good, we thought a lot about this question of, is it right to give someone who just happens to be a super user of this game, too much power in the community because they may not be the best person to have a sense of what should happen in the community. That said, it was a cost that we debated over, having coins to spend on your values is a really nice incentive for gameplay. To play the game. There are costs to that, which is what you're saying, which is it may not be an accurate reflection, but it will get people to play. So we went back and forth about that, and we don't, and basically we decided that it's something that we want to go forward with and see how it works out to see if that's a problem, because it very well could be a problem. But you said something else that actually made me think. You said that it could be that someone's just playing the game but they don't care about how they spend their coins, and it may be something that we do to give people. If they don't care about spending their coins, maybe we give them another opportunity to spend their coins on something else. That maybe, maybe we think about some other path where people who don't actually want to vote on these values can still have an incentive to collect these coins. So it's something to think about that we hadn't really considered. But you're right. I mean, I can imagine the player who says, I don't really care that much about these things. I just like playing the game. And we have to think very seriously about that. I mean, we have thought about other incentives like, getting local businesses involved and just sort of doing the Foursquare thing, right? Giving coupons for local businesses, which could work for this, and we could actually, use some of that coinage towards something like that. But then you'd have more people spending coins on, free coffee than value. So I don't know. I'm just sort of talking off the top of my head, but it's something that we do need to get a little bit more sophisticated about the incentive system and safeguard against some of those issues. But some of these are research questions. Like I'm kind of interested to know what happens, honestly, and that's not really fair to a community maybe, but I think it has to happen. We have to sort of test, and we might try it in different ways to see which one works better.